Welcome to Accounting High.
I'm currently in the middle of taking another course creation course to create better courses to build a better practice for my clients and think about what does my client want or need? How do I package it in a way that makes it the most effective for them?
Hi, class is in session. It's time for Shoperations at Accounting. Hi, class is in session. It's time for Shoperations at Accounting. Hi, kids. Hybrid teams, for Pete's sake. I'm trying to manage through screens, but I can't figure out which Zoom window's my next meeting. Well, since 2012, my firm's been in the cloud. Join us as we go deep. I'll try not to run it to the ground. We're sharing profit and loss and managing back office. The tax staff just quit. Tried to hire on LinkedIn, no luck. And scope creep, team count, CAS, automate tax, compliance, transactions, ID, and bottlenecks. Come on, ops. Scotty, wait a minute. It's my firm, dog. I know, and I said you could run it however you want.
Introducing the star of our show.
Scotty and Ashley Francis.
We're gonna have a problem here.
Saw that.
Oh, students, you are in for a treat today. Today we have Ashley Francis, aka Seattle Tax, aka Ashley the CPA. We're going to have a discussion about everything but AI and Jason Staats. Those are two things that we will not discuss on this episode. Fair?
Absolutely fair. Yeah.
All right. Now that we got all that out of the way, now that we got all that tech talk out of the way, we're going to really get into it. Today, students, you're going to hear about how Ashley's built out her practice as a niche that focuses on high net worth individuals, trust taxes, family offices. She's got a firm here that she's building, and we're going to talk about it. But first, students, you're going to hear how Ashley became the CPA. Ashley, can you share with our students why accounting? How you even got into this?
Oh my goodness. I'm going to be shoved into some lockers. I've wanted to be an accountant since I was a little kid. My mom was an admin in a CPA firm, and I spent time with her after school, saw all the things that CPAs did. And then when she went to go work in a construction company, she was the office manager. Then she had me doing the unpaid child labor, doing the books. So I've been on this path my entire life.
Did you ever have any doubts at some point or like want to do something else?
This is embarrassing, but for a little bit of time in college, I kind of flirted with doing finance. But then I was brought back to reality because my finance guidance counselor had a little bit of a drinking problem. And I was like, you know what, this doesn't seem like the path that I want to go down. So that's, I went back to account, and it's very random, right? It's very random how these little facts like direct the rest of your life.
But it's so true. And this is story after story. It's usually the person that takes interest in you or the teacher. And that's usually the stories I hear is always the teacher that guides you into going into this. You had the opposite. You had somebody or an instructor, I guess, or something, and you saw the downside that could have led to, and it drove you away, or drove you back into accounting, which I guess seemed safer.
Absolutely. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I think a lot of people go into this profession just because it is low risk, right? Like at any company that's going down the drain, the accountants get to stay on last. When things are going sideways in the world, accountants are always needed. I'm not going to talk about that thing that we said we're not going to talk about. But even with that,
because all of this existed long before those things that we are not going to talk about, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you went into accounting and no regrets?
Oh, absolutely.
Question mark.
No regrets. No regrets. I do still, can I say the word tech?
Maybe we should have like a swear jar or something that we're tallying.
Oh yeah, no, though, if I get on that one topic, then that's going to be what this whole thing is about.
If we ever accidentally do it,
I love
leave it out like it's a swear word. Yeah.
I love
Ian,
it.
you know what to do.
I think the thing about accounting that I love is that at the end of the day, it's not about the numbers, but it's about the people that are impacted by the numbers. And I mean, I'm fortunate in that I have a practice where I work with clients that are people. Maybe accountants that work in internal practices don't feel this way, but I have the fortunate position of being the person that's doing the thing that helps other people be less freaked out about their finances and about accounting and about their taxes. And so that seems like a fantastic.
You see the people and you feel the impact that you're having on them.
Absolutely. I mean, just a little bit of a sidetrack.
Sure.
When we think about all of our clients that are exhibiting maybe not bad behavior, but behavior that's not appropriate to our practice, like they're calling us a million times or they're upset with us or whatever, right? Almost all of that stems from fear and the unknown. And that's all around a huge topic in their life, which is money. If you think about it from the perspective of we have the opportunity to help reduce that fear and provide clarity and be that trusted advisor, that's such a huge gift. And some of us aren't the best at being people, but we can be money people, which is almost as good, right?
And they say that that's some of the hardest things for some people to talk about. So as an accountant, we normalize those hard conversations. And so it means so much to our clients that we're able to talk, and they trust us so much. That's why we feel like therapists, or sometimes, dare I say it, we feel like prostitutes.
I think that's maybe a you thing.
But let's go into, where did you get your start in accounting?
I started out at a regional firm that doesn't exist anymore. And it was regional because it was based out of Montana and had an office in Seattle. So it was like the opposite of being in a small town and having a big firm that you're a satellite of. It was a big city with a small vibe sort of environment. And it was really interesting because the next guidance counselor that I had, I went and asked, should I interview with the Big Four in college? And he was like, oh, no, I don't think that's the right environment for you. So I didn't. And then I went back to him later and he's like, I don't know why I didn't ever said that. So I was like, okay. But once again, one of those decisions that had a big positive impact on my career, because going to the smaller firm, I got to see a lot of different types of work. And one of the types of work that I got to see was forensic accounting and litigation support around trusts and estate. And that's where my love affair for trusts and estates came from. And I had passed the CPA exam the year before it was required to have 150 hours, but I went and got my master's of science in taxation anyway, just because it was easier than making friends. So friends are scary. Finished my master's in tax. I focused it in trusts and estates. And then I went to go work in a hedge fund that provided financial reporting and tax services to families with over $500 million in assets. It was just a big change.
This was way before Twitter. Were you on Twitter back then?
Okay. So the origin story of Twitter is that in 2022, I went to Engage and I went to a session that Byron Patrick and Nicole Davis put on. And at one point, they encouraged everybody to tweet something on Twitter. And I had an account but had never used it. So I approached Nicole after the session and asked her how to tweet. And she is so sweet, and she showed me. And then I just started talking about things that I thought were interesting, and apparently other people thought they were interesting too.
Shout out to Coley. She's an OG here at Accounting
She's
High.
wonderful.
She taught me Twitter too. She got me on Twitter too. Oh man,
she should be
so
receiving
funny.
kickbacks from them,
Yeah.
like some sort of compensation. Yeah.
And of course, shout out to Byron. He's our
He's wonderful.
And the reason I asked that is because you talked about, socially, it's easy. It was easier just to get another degree than go try and be with people. But isn't that a social network? Isn't Twitter a social network? And you're flourishing in there, right? Or maybe not. Maybe it's all just for show, but you got well over 10,000 followers and like you're crushing it on there.
I have 8.8 thousand followers.
All right.
So,
Maybe not well over 10, but in a few
but
months, maybe in a few.
maybe. I want to distinguish being good at social media versus being good at human interaction,
Ooh, okay.
because I can be good at social media because I'm behind a keyboard. I can be clever in a moment when nobody is looking at me, but anyone who's ever met me in person at like the big events, like the tax retreat, I just freeze like a deer in the headlights. I'm like, I no longer know words that other humans say to each other. How do people talk to each other or ask questions?
So I
Um,
was going to bring that up because it was hard to get you out. Like you kept going back to your room. I'm like, everybody's here. Everybody wants to hang out. And that must be hard.
I love being around people if they're not paying attention to me, like if I can be in a crowd and nobody's talking to me. But I do also really cherish my quiet time. So I got the Aura ring, and now I'm like obsessively tracking my resilience, trying to get it above 0. And I noticed that when I go out, when I leave the house, like my anxiety spikes. I do enjoy being around people, but in the morning, if I'm just by myself, that's when I'm getting more done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm the exact opposite of that. I'm shifting back. I've got this whole track that we're on here because we're going to get
Nice.
to the trust taxes and we're going to get to your firm. As you're working at these firms, and the reason I asked about the start, because I know you did work at Deloitte for a stint, though,
I
right?
did.
And
I did for 3 years. Yep.
then you made it to one Matthew G. Norton and you had a team that you were working with. Was that the first time that you were working with like a team or you in charge of people working under you?
I was a manager at Deloitte, so I had people working
Okay.
for me there, and then I had a short time at PwC before I went to MGN. So the big difference is MGN was a family office slash commercial real estate company. So I had 2 roles there, running the family office. And then the big difference between that and public accounting was that my team was my team and I didn't need to share them with anybody. So resource wise, it was easier to set the culture and the tone and the direction of like the work that was going to be done versus having to compete with other managers and senior managers for resources in the Big Four.
Were you feeling any impact on the clients that you're working with or the team that you were managing? As we were
Impact.
talking about impact earlier, the impact that you have with clients now, working directly with clients,
Oh,
were you feeling that?
absolutely.
Were you
Yeah.
feeling that working at these firms?
I think working with the Big Four, especially at Deloitte, I worked in the private client group where you worked with individuals, and if you have a large amount of money, usually you're not working with the individual, you're working with their representative, the
Mm-hmm.
person running their family office. So working with those folks, if you are working directly with them, you can feel that large impact. I don't work with corporations just because like I don't feel that human positive impact.
Mm-hmm.
Like private foundations, love those. Trust and estates, like they're family entities, things that are really important to a few people, I guess is
So
how I'd explain it.
how did you end up going out on your own? Or what was the straw that drove the camel's back? Because you had worked at a lot of different firms, but then started your own practice.
Yeah, I never thought I would start my own practice, honestly. But my son was diagnosed with being on the autism spectrum and having ADHD in 2016. And he was not thriving in school. He was in 2nd grade and saying that he wanted to be dead. And since that goth phase is usually around middle school to high school, I was like, oh, this is a big issue. But finding adequate education that would meet his needs was really challenging. Seattle has a pretty high population of children who are on the spectrum or neurodiverse, so there's a lot of demand for a small amount of resources. And I decided to start my own firm so that I could do the unthinkable, which is homeschool him.
How did you end up doing the homeschool or get him out of school?
I wanted to get him out of school. When I first started homeschooling, I assumed that it was all going to be women who wore a lot of gingham dresses and churned their own butter, because I had this preconceived notion from television of what homeschoolers are like. And then I found that Seattle has a large and diverse population of homeschoolers who range from folks that are fairly conservative to folks that are, I don't know how many folks have seen the TikToks about unschoolers not teaching their children to read, but to that level. And so at first I started very accounting-esque, which means that I created a spreadsheet that was down to the 30-minute increments, which did not turn out to be something that worked for a child on the autism/ADHD spectrum. So I had to learn quite a bit about educating someone who didn't necessarily want to be educated in an unstructured environment. The learning curve was steep.
Yeah. How is that going from working with clients and working with taxes to now working with your child and teaching?
It was a trip. I will admit, one of the nice things about working with ultra high net worth individuals, like you tend to have to be the calming presence in the relationship and the one that guides the conversation. So I had skills around that. I already liked to train people. It was that change of having somebody say, no, I don't want to learn. That was the part that was challenging, because I'm used to staff. I mean, maybe they don't want to learn, but they're not going to say no outright. They're just going to not do it and say that they did it. Whereas this was a little bit different. So I learned quite a bit, and I bring it actually now into my courses and my speaking, what I call sneaky learning, which is when you educate somebody even though they don't necessarily know that you're doing it. So you can just kind of slide knowledge under the radar.
Sneaky learning. I like that.
Yeah.
We'll definitely get to the speaking stuff too, because that's another skill, another muscle that you're growing and learning and stretching. But trust taxes on your own, how did you get your first client? And was this a niche when you first started this firm?
It was two different things. How I got my first client was, I think a lot of us have the same experience where it's a friends and family thing. My earliest clients were friends and then referrals from friends. But then also because I was running a family office, part of that is working with financial advisors. And since they had worked with me quite a bit, when they had clients that they thought would be a good fit, they would refer the clients to me. So that's how I built up my practice. And then over time, I decided that I wanted to work with a specific type of individual or target a specific type of individual and work more with estate and trusts. And so I'm a member of the Seattle Estate Planning Society, and I go to the estate planning conferences. And folks are always looking for somebody that can do estate and trust tax work, because there aren't that many folks out there who can. So they tend to be at the larger firms. It tends to be very expensive, even doing the same work.
What I was always fascinated by is how young you are and how you're working with these trusts and estates. Like usually when I think of somebody, an accountant that's working with trusts and estates, they are also in their 70s. They have well established, been doing this for a while. So it's brilliant. That's where a lot of the money is, right? I don't think your clients have any problem paying you.
It depends on the client. There are specific things I've learned about wealth. Someone can be wealthy and still not want to pay you, because what I have learned is first generation wealth tends to be more frugal, because they didn't get wealthy. They made their own wealth, right? And so they still haven't switched into that mindset that they're wealthy. They don't feel abundance yet. Second generation wealth saw it get created and have to deal with it. They're more willing to pay for quality services just so they don't have to deal with it. And then third generation wealth is just going to spend it. They tend to be, yeah. A lot of times I work with professional fiduciaries because they have trust, tax returns, trust and estates But then also, if I'm going to be marketing to clients, I'm usually trying to market to that second generation wealth because they have a need. They don't really know these big firms very well. Their parents may have worked with these big firms, but they don't have that relationship. And they just want somebody that they can trust and who will do the stuff.
And they appreciate the value in what you're giving.
They do.
So how do you find them? Or do you have any efforts that you're marketing toward more of them? Or do you get a lot of your work through referrals?
I get almost 100% of my work through referrals, like relationships with financial advisors or attorneys. And I think the important thing that I am really beginning to learn is you have to vet the financial advisor or attorney before you take any of their referrals, because I've found that there is such a huge need for a tax professional with a pulse that a lot of these financial advisors, they really want to make a referral for this client, but it's not a good referral. Yeah.
Those are very important relationships to build and to cultivate, is ones that are working with your ideal clients. So,
yeah.
And I bet you find some of them on Twitter or places like that.
You know, the fascinating thing is I do have some referral sources from Twitter, but I found that it's the ones you meet in person and you go to coffee with and you like spend time with that you build that. I know I'm like constantly online, so it seems like a weird thing to say. Like being in person, you build that relationship a little bit more.
They see the humans. You see the human in somebody when you're with them. There's so much more that you get out of an in-person interaction that you cannot get by email or even by Zoom.
Yep.
You can't even get that by Zoom. And most of it's not by Zoom. It's emails and it's typing and it's words, and you don't get the full context. If you know that person and you can hear their voice in what they've written, that's different.
Yep.
If you know them really well, you can hear their voice in what they're typing. But if you don't know them really well, then you're almost hearing another person's voice when somebody's typing to you, or the context of that. So I think that's really important too, is these in-person relationships that we all have, you know, our students and you and me and everybody, be intentional with those relationships. That's precious. That's important. Let's bring it back to the trust taxes. You're growing this practice. As it happens with people like us, we find distractions and we start doing things that get us excited and start going to conferences. You start going on Twitter, meeting new people, and start speaking.
Right.
And then all other new opportunities start opening up, and it's flourishing because then there's this new technology. You're running a practice too, and that's...
I will say that I'm currently not taking on new clients and intentionally shrinking the practice to expand into educational opportunities. And it could be way bigger if I wanted to grow it. But
you started growing something else.
I started growing something else. It's interesting because, to your point about that new technology that came out that I do a lot of speaking about, and my practice, one of the challenges is there's not a ton of overlap between the two, and it creates this cognitive dissonance that I'm very much struggling with and trying to integrate. So if anyone is thinking, oh, I should do two different things and have a side hustle, have your side hustle be very close to what your main hustle is. Otherwise, your brain is going to be split in two constantly.
You're talking to somebody, you're talking about split brains. You're talking to somebody that has created an alter ego and a split personality that has stemmed from this. So I actually have two people you could talk to. You're talking to Scott today. OKR hasn't showed up yet, but maybe later. So I get it. I totally get what you're going through. And it's make a decision at some point. And I still haven't done it. That's why it's split off. At the end of the day, they're two separate things. Right?
I'm also like the eternal optimist that I'll figure it out someday. I just have to keep banging my head against the wall.
Is it the eternal optimist or is it stubborn?
Yes. So all of the work that I've put into my speaking skills, because I did theater of public speaking with Misty Mejia.
We're both alumni.
Really? I didn't know that.
I did, yeah.
I'm currently in the middle of taking another course creation course to create better courses. That has improved my understanding of how to build a better practice for my clients, because a lot of it requires you to get out of your own perspective and think about, what does my client want or need? How do I package it in a way that makes it the most effective for them? Those skills have been valuable. Also, that one technology is such a Swiss Army knife. If I just sat down and used it to build out all of my systems, I could in a weekend. It's the additional distractions that I want to speak to, because I was listening to Cal Newport's Deep Work.
I love that show.
I was listening to the audiobook, and he had mentioned
he's
that
got a podcast too.
I didn't
Deep
know
Questions.
Neil Stevenson refused to do speaking engagements because it took away from creating his masterwork. Like, if he did a whole bunch of speaking engagements, he wouldn't have time to create these massive books that he creates. And then Ali Abdal, I think that's how you say his name, he's on YouTube. He said the same thing in a YouTube video I was watching last night. And so that kind of sparked in my brain, speaking is fun. It's a lot of work. Like, I don't think folks understand that if you have a good presenter, a good speaker on stage, that hour-long presentation, at least for me, could take 10 plus hours to create. And I don't tend to have the same presentations in different speaking engagements. I love being on stage, but I'm starting to think, is this taking away from me creating my masterwork? And when I think about my masterwork, I think about it in the terms of, my goal is to get our profession beyond the new technology veil in a way that is sustainable and that the people in our profession thrive. Think about our profession, even without this new technology that we're not mentioning, we have been in decline for at least 20 years. I mean, 20 years ago, it was like you couldn't tell, but then it's been accelerated by so many things happening. Yeah. And I love this profession. I want everybody to survive, thrive, and get paid for the value that they provide, plus, like, kind of needed for the global economy. And I do want to retire someday, and if we don't have enough CPAs to do auditing, then everything will crash and I won't have any money in my 401k. So a little bit selfish, but my main goal is to get our profession back on the upward trajectory. And it's like a big goal for just one person. So I hope I know other people are helping.
We've talked about the hill that you're climbing with that. And it's a noble cause that you're doing and creating courses around that. But I also want to talk about white labeling trust taxes. Yeah. But let's talk about white labeling trust taxes for other accountants, because this could be another great source of revenue, a great source of referrals. Other accountants could be great source of referral for you. And other accountants don't want to do trust taxes. Most of our listeners...
Which is bizarre to me. I just don't understand that. I don't understand.
I'm sure it is. That's why we love that you are out there. So you can become a source for referrals. Let's talk about this.
Right. So this all started 2 years ago. Remember back when I got on Twitter, way long time ago, I met this woman. Her Twitter handle is Atlanta Tax, and she's one of my most favorite humans on the planet.
Allison's been on the show.
Yeah. I love Allison. But one thing that she's been doing for 2 years, every couple weeks or so, is asking me when I'm going to start creating courses around trust and estates. She's like, there's such a need. And at one point she dropped this idea, like providing white label trust and estate taxation and accounting services. And I was like, oh, nobody would ever want that. So she hit me at a weak spot recently where I was like, what do I want to do? She's like, trust and estate courses. When I thought about creating courses for trust and estates, I've already built out what the product ecosystem is going to look like, but I'm going to create the courses as if I am training my own employees. And the course is basically going to be so hands-on and action-oriented, practice-oriented, that an employee could take it and feel moderately comfortable about actually preparing trust and estate tax returns. And so I was thinking, well, if I have that resource, it feels like the next logical step would be to build out a team of accountants and tax preparers that I oversee to do this work for folks who maybe don't want to have that person on their team. And Allison's such a visionary. Like, I didn't think anybody would want it, but I mentioned it to you the other day and you were so excited. I was like, what? Really? Okay. And so that is a direction I'd like to go in. But at that internal position of nobody's going to want this, and then also, oh God, what if people want this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like holding both of those at once.
Well, part of you thinks that there is potential that people will actually need it.
Right.
And that means it's more work. That means that you have to commit to something.
Yeah.
And that's what's scary.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna take that. I'm gonna eat a couple tacos and probably some cookies and like absorb. I process my feelings through food. Absorb that thought because that hit a little home. Yeah. Like that's the one thing I did not realize. And if anybody's watching and they're like, oh, I'm going to create a newsletter or I'm going to create a series of classes, just remember that you're bringing something to life into the world.
Fantastic. Class dismissed. Say everything you want about AI and automations and Staats. We've exercised restraint.
Did we?
Up
okay,
until this
great.
point. Yes.
Gold stars for us.
Tune in next week at Accounting High.
The reason I'm so excited about AI and automation is because it brings those capabilities to reality. You can today create a chatbot that will train your new staff in how to do something, and they can go back over and over and ask questions. When in the history of ever have new staff had access to that amount of support? Never.